Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome back to another 1/400 scale die-cast model aircraft review of this from JC Wings, the Airbus A340-600. If you ask most people to define the quadjet, they're most likely to give you one of two answers. One, the Boeing 747 or the Airbus A380. Both of those airplanes are macrocosmically very similar. They are both ultra-wide-body quadjet passenger airliners. And the 747 really created this segment of the market in that it was the first jumbo jet, in big rhetorical air quotes. You would define the jumbo jet as ultra-wide-body, 4 engines, designed to span the oceans and the continents with as many people and as much cargo as possible aboard. Makes sense. 2 airplanes fit that archetype. And then there's this one, the A340. In my opinion, the A340 has been the also-ran of the jumbo jet market in that, well, it's not a 747. In fact, it's far too young even to have competed directly with the 747. 747's been around since the late 60s, and this series of airplanes only came about in the early 1990s. It's also too old to be the A380. That airplane didn't really come about until the mid-2000s. So really what you have here is the intermediate zone, the convergence zone, if you will, between having the overall plan of something like a 747, but being a little bit smaller and being a little bit more habile for more airports around the world, while still retaining the wide-body quadjet scheme. That's where the A340 comes in. Although many may consider this airplane now to be obviated, if not obsolete, by, number one, its successor, the A350, but also by other airplanes not quite in its class, but other things like the Boeing 767, and perhaps even, in some rare circumstances, maybe even the 737 MAX series. But for what it is, the A340 is very much a very competent and cogent intercontinental airliner using the classic quadjet scheme. JC Wings here bring us their example in 1/400 scale of this, what I think is a venerable aircraft. Let's take a closer look at it. Before we take a closer look at this wonderful scale model aircraft, let's take a look at the box from whence it comes. Coming in here at very close range from screen right, here is the JC Wings Airbus A340 box. And a little bit of a departure from a few of the other boxes that we have seen in that we have not one but 2 renderings of the aircraft present here on the front panel. They are slightly different from each other. Obviously, they're the same A340-600, but the bottom one does have some text along the window line there that the top one does not have, and it's not present on the actual model either. So did they release a second version of this model with that text underneath the windows? Maybe they did. If they did, I'm not aware of it. However, the text there reads longer, larger, farther, faster, something behind the wing there, quieter, and smoother. So one of those words, not legible, but clearly it's there. Either way, that's the front panel of the box, and I really do have to say I love the aesthetics here. It is so delightfully mid to late 90s, Airbus A340, and then obviously the colors here and the designs here mirroring the design of the livery on the aircraft, this Airbus house livery as it were. However, it just screams late 90s to me. I grew up in this time, and it just makes me feel all kinds of nostalgia. But very nice box art nonetheless, although a bit simplistic, I will say. 1/400 scale die-cast aircraft model there in the lower right. Very, very cool. Bottom panel of the box, smaller rendering of the aircraft, Airbus A340-600, and this sticker here with that number, that is just a lot number for the distributor, not part of the box itself. Barcode with an item number, which appears to be LH4167, 1/400 scale die-cast aircraft model visible there. Right panel of the box, plane set for Airbus A340-600. Top panel effectively identical to the bottom panel there, minus the distributor sticker. And the left side, we have got our JC Wings logo and our disclaimer here. Not suitable for children under 14 years. Please note, contains small parts, danger of being swallowed. Yeah. So, in other words, if you're below 14, you can't have this for some reason, and it tells you this in German, English, and French. Made in China. Cool. Back of the box, we don't have any openable tabs here to take a look at the model inside the box. However, we do have this schematic view again, a recapitulation of the 2 renderings of the aircraft from the cover of the box, which is interesting. And we also have a schematic view from above with some dimensions here. Obviously our wingspan 63.45 meters, and then from the port side our length overall 75.36 meters, height from the bottom of the main gear to the top of the vertical stabilizer 17.93 meters there. And then, of course, we've got some more specifications here. Airbus A340-600. Manufacturer is obviously Airbus. Overall length, 75.36 meters. Wingspan, 63.45 meters. Height, 17.93 meters. Number of engines, 4. And the engine type specifically is the Rolls-Royce Trent 556-61. And, of course, there in the bottom left, JC Wings logo once again. So, interesting box design, a little bit of a departure from what we've seen from other manufacturers, but pretty good, although there is no write-up about the aircraft, nor are there any really detailed specifications available on the aircraft in terms of passenger capacities and things like that. But we are able to remedy that for ourselves in due course. One other thing, though, that I should mention about the box is not the outer carton, but inside you get the plastic clamshell as you would expect to see from plenty of other manufacturers. However, you also get, well, first of all, these open cell foam rubber pads that the wings and tail can sort of sit on when the airplane is in the little vacuum-formed void here. But in addition to the plastic that you get with pretty much every model in this scale, you're also going to get this, and this little plastic bag contains a stand in 2 parts. This pylon goes into this base, and then the airplane can sit on that stand. And in the B-roll, in the outro here, you'll see the airplane sitting on that stand rather than the pewter Gemini Jets one that I normally use for that. So JC Wings give you a stand with this one, and it's a little bit, again, of a departure from what we've seen from other manufacturers. I appreciate it, and I do think that throwing in a stand every now and again with a 1/400 scale airplane would be a nice touch. You do almost always get them with 1/200s, but the 1/400s stands are most often sold separately. I definitely appreciate JC Wings throwing a stand in with this one. While the box certainly did give us some information about the A340-600, it didn't give us all that much information about the airplane, so we can divine some more on our own. First of all, the A340 series, it is not simply comprised of the A340-600 as we see here. This is the largest and longest of the variant. However, the A340 series contains the 200, the 300, the 500, and the 600 as we see here. The first flight of an A340 of any specification was on October 25th, 1991, and the A340 had a service introduction with Lufthansa and Air France concurrently on March 15th, 1993. However, the 340-600, this airplane was launched along with the Dash 500 on December 8th, 1997. However, the Dash 600 would not take to the air for the first time until April 23rd, 2001. So a little bit of a gestation period from when this particular variant of the series was announced and its first flight, and of course 10 years, almost 10 years exactly elapsing between October 1991 and April of 2001 between the first 340 flying and the last 340, as in the first Dash 600 taking flight for the first time. The aircraft throughout the entire A340 series was produced between 1991 and 2012, with 380 of them completed. 377 went to airlines, and 3 of them were test aircraft, such as this one here. So very interesting to see that. This is actually pretty cool in that you have got a homogeneous, contiguous series of airplanes, as in the A340, but there is such radical variation across them. The Dash 200 is a lot smaller than the Dash 600. They visually look very similar in that the configuration is the same. They've got a low and wide wing, they have got a traditional empennage structure, but that fuselage length, oh boy, you have got yourself quite some variation in the overall dimensions of this airplane. From Airbus themselves, though, what did they say about the Dash 600? Well, dimensions as we had on the box, they were accurate. Airbus say the overall length was 75.36 meters or 247 feet 3 inches. The cabin length, that is the habitable volume in the fuselage, 60.98 meters or 200 feet 1 inch. Fuselage width is 5.64 meters or 18 feet 6 inches. The maximum cabin width slightly narrower as you would expect. That's 5.28 meters or 17 feet 4 inches. The wingspan is 63.45 meters or 208 feet 2 inches. The height, 17.93 meters. That's from the bottom of the main gear to the top of the vertical stabilizer. 58 feet 10 inches in old money. The track here means the width between the farthest apart axles in the landing gear. So that would be the outboard main gear there just underneath midships. That's 10.69 meters or 35 feet 1 inch. And the wheelbase, that's the distance between the nose gear and the rearmost main gear, that's 32.89 meters or 107 feet 11 inches. Capacity, maximum seating in, let's say, an all-economy configuration from stem to stern, 475 passengers. However, most typically as this airplane is configured by its airline customers, somewhere between 320 and 370 passengers in 3-class configurations. Cargo, we can fit 43 LD3 pallets in the cargo deck, that's below the passenger area in the fuselage. Maximum pallet number underfloor there, assuming they're LD3s, is 14. The aircraft can also carry by water volume, in other words, filling every potentially usable space in that cargo deck. That's 286 cubic meters or 9,464 cubic feet. Performance on the airplane, we have a maximum range, assuming maximum fuel and nominal payload anyway, of 14,450 kilometers. That's 7,800 nautical miles. Maximum speed in terms of Mach number is Mach 0.86. Maximum ramp weight is 381.2 metric tons. That is 840,000 pounds, give or take. Maximum takeoff weight is 380 tons or 837,000 pounds. Maximum landing weight is 265 tons or 584,000 pounds. Maximum zero fuel weight, as in we have a nominal payload but our fuel is not yet in, 251 tons or 553,000 pounds. Maximum fuel capacity is 204,500 liters or 54,020 US gallons. So a rather large airplane with a rather large passenger and cargo capacity, to be honest. I don't believe there are any strict cargo-only variants of the A340-600, but it would be a rather voluminous space there, particularly if you were to remove the passenger seating area and then just have one contiguous open space between the cargo deck and the top of the fuselage. But that's neither here nor there. What we've got here is a very large quadjet airliner. It is very much an endangered species in this era of long-haul, high-efficiency, wide-body twin jets, but there is still a place for the quad jets in my mind, and well, the A340 is probably the most interesting quad jet out there. Everybody thinks about the 747 when you talk about a wide-body intercontinental quad jet airliner, but hey, the A340 exists as well, and it's still out there, and it's still flying regularly scheduled service across the continents, and well, it's here, you will see them in the sky, and therefore I think that they still have a place, and I think that they are very interesting airplanes. Stopping our rotation here and starting to take a little bit of a closer look at some of the macrocosmic features that we're going to see here on A340. First of all, you can see that we have got some very nice paintwork going on here. Obviously a predominantly white fuselage, particularly in this Airbus house livery, but we do have a flash of delightfully mid-90s coloration there on the empennage with the big A340 lettering as well. Very cool. Obviously no title graphics as it were on the fuselage, but we do have A340-600 there in the forward quarter of the fuselage. So that looks very nice, I must say. As we start to come in a little bit closer on the nose of the airplane, some more details start to come into focus here as we lose our focus, ironically enough, on the camera. There we go. Very nice tampo print work going on here. Quite evidently we have got the cockpit windows very nicely visible there. Lots of reflections from my lights in that area, but looks good. They look straight, they look as symmetrical as they should look, and we even have the little shut line here denoting the boundary between the fuselage structure and the radome. So all that looks good. Also you can see there, a little Airbus logo there with the text and the commercial logo for Airbus underneath the cockpit windows. Looks good. Obviously around this side of the fuselage we have got our R1 through R5 doors. We've got 5 doors per side on the 340-600. Obviously we've got a large passenger cabin, so that all looks very, very good. May or may not come through here on camera, but The first 4 cabin windows here are shaded over, so then it's actually the 5th right side window that's visible there for the first one being open. So interesting proportion there created by that. Also here on the forward starboard side we have got rather large cargo door, and then of course we have got our complement of pitot tubes and static ports, and those continue a little bit of a ways aft there to about a quarter distance down the length of the fuselage. Coming into the wing root and wing spar area, you can see that as far as our model is concerned, this is a cradle arrangement, so we've got our wings as one piece, and then the fuselage mounts on top of that, and they join up along this shut line that you can see there, incorporating the wing root and a wing spar area along this shut line. Looks good enough, and I've got to say, at scale, of course, looking at this zoomed in as we are with the camera, it magnifies anything, but by eye, it all looks pretty contiguous to me. Pretty good. Leading edge of the starboard wing, at very least, you can see some leading edge slat detail going on there in terms of shut lines between where the slats come through. That looks good. And of course, the intake sides of our 2 engines here on the starboard sides, the Trent 556 series from Rolls-Royce. You can even see there some Rolls-Royce logos on the nacelles on either side, your outboard and inboard. Looks good. We'll see that a little bit more closely later on, but looks very, very nice. There is also fan blade detail in there, which we will see later on. Moving out to the wing tip, you can see that we do have a little bit of an end fence detail right there with our positioning strobe light there, the green strobe here for the starboard side. Looks very, very nice. Moving up and aft, there is the empennage. Of course, we'll look at this in some miniature presentation a little bit later on, but very nice there. Nice geometry just above where the vertical stabilizer joins with the fuselage. A little bit of a blister there. That looks good. And of course, the horizontal stabilizer is visible in that area as well. Obscured by the horizontal stabilizer is the tail cone, which has some very nice detailing work as well. But for the moment, what we see here on 340-600 here looks absolutely marvelous. Taking a look at the starboard side here proper of A340-600. A little bit more of a square-on view relative to that 3/4 front view that we just had. But as we saw in the previous segment, we have got our forward section of fuselage with our R1 and R2 doors clearly visible here. And obviously our passenger cabin starts in this area. We have got 4 windows that are blanked out in the forward section of the fuselage right through here, and we have something similar behind that R2 door. We have another 4 windows that are blanked out. I don't know entirely what this is. The only thing that I can surmise is that that is either a flight attendant prep area or perhaps a galley area or perhaps both, but clearly there is some reason why we do not have windows there, or at very least we have shaded windows in that section of the fuselage, and then they are open in the rest of the passenger cabin. Interesting. We also have some further shaded windows here just aft of the R3 door, which is really an overwing exit. And then we have got our R4 door and the R5 back here. The R5, obviously, I would expect there to be lavatory facilities or perhaps more galley facilities back here, so we've got 3 windows shaded there. So interesting details with window shading going on here with the A340-600 fuselage, but I like it. Everything looks very, very nice. Everything looks proportional. Things look scale correct. Shapes look pretty correct. And of course, we have got a menagerie of other details, both separately applied as well as tampo printed on. Taking a better look here at the wing spar area, and then really out to the wingtip as well. Great stuff going on here. Obviously you can see our wingtip device there. It's just an end fence, as you would see on many other airliner wings, there to increase our lift to drag ratio in terms of more lift over less drag, and really that helps with speed and fuel efficiency. Other things that we could see here, we have got our starboard engines plainly visible here. We've got Rolls-Royce logos visible on both of those outboard sides of the nacelles, on the inboard and outboard engines. Very, very cool. A little bit small, but it's there. Additionally, you can see that we have got some static port detail here in terms of things that the ground crews can interface with, in terms of a manual start override for bleed air and things to start the engines without the assistance from the cockpit necessarily. Very, very cool stuff. Trailing edge of the wing, little bit of the flap armature visible there. Obviously that's all covered up by the fairings, the canoes as it were, just to add a little bit more streamlining to that. Also you can see the pylons to which the engine nacelles are mounted. Very, very cool. Continuing to move aft into the empennage area. Here we can see the only real feature of the livery in terms of color changes. We have got yellow, orange, and red stripes that are separating the blue big stripe from the rest of the otherwise white fuselage. A340 lettering there on the vertical stabilizer. It looks very, very good. You can also see that those stripes continue down the aft portion of the fuselage and they terminate in the belly of the airplane where it joins up with the complementary feature on the other side. Very, very cool. Also visible here on the airplane, we have got our registration, Foxtrot Whiskey Whiskey Charlie Charlie, and we have got our tail number, if you will, 376. This is probably a line number for the airframe, I would think, but I'm not entirely sure about that. But regardless, that is the detail that's visible there on the empennage in terms of registration. Very, very cool stuff. Also visible here, you can see the attitude of the model sitting on the gear. Remember, we have got 3 main gear bogies. We have got 2 outboards and then 1 centerline inboard bogie. They're all lined up with each other, so just one is properly visible here. But we've got plastic wheels and rubber tires over them, so that looks good. And the nose gear is the same with the plastic wheel and rubber tire. All the wheels roll very, very nicely, and I don't really have any complaints about the landing gear or really anything else that we could see here on the starboard side of A340-600. Now taking a look from an aft view of A340-600, very, very nice stuff to see here. Very cool visual proportion of the airplane in terms of the fuselage width in juxtaposition to the wingspan and obviously the spacings of the engines and everything. It's very pleasing to my eyes anyway, just from a visual proportion standpoint. Looks very, very cool. Some details that are evident from this angle though, obviously we have got our main landing gear now coming into proper view, 3 bogies in the main gear, obviously 2 outboards and then 1 centerline inboard. There are 4 wheels per bogie on each of those struts, and that is one of the distinguishing features apart from just the overall fuselage length. But one of the distinguishing features from the Dash 600 series from, say, the Dash 200, Dash 300 series of the A340 is the presence of that centerline 3rd bogie in the main gear. So if you see one on the ground and the fuselage length doesn't tip you off to something being different about this airplane, the landing gear configuration certainly will. Beyond that, though, just overall proportion of everything in terms of the main wings, the empennage, the vertical stabilizer, everything looks like it is fit and finished very well. Things are straight and level here, not seeing any weird bends in anything, particularly moving toward wingtips. I don't see anything that's sitting higher or lower than it should. The engine nacelles and the engines themselves, they're all mounted straight. That looks good. The empennage as well. Both of the horizontal stabilizers look to be straight and equal in terms of their proportion and pitch, and the vertical stabilizer also appears to be pointing straight up. Nothing really looks crooked there. Zooming in into the tail cone area on the model, what do we see? That wonderful proportion there of the empennage looks good. You can also see how the stripes in the livery, they come down and they converge in the belly of the aircraft. Looks very nice. It's a contiguous strip rather than 2 separate stripes. You just have to be from this angle to see that. But it looks very, very good. Additionally, here in the tail cone, you can see that we have got separately applied silver paint there, just to show the exhaust outlet for the auxiliary power unit, in addition to there being an access hatch underneath the tail cone to service the auxiliary power unit. Looks good. Taking a look at the trailing edges of the wings, here on the port wing you can see the canoes covering up that flap actuation armature. It looks very, very good. And of course the exhaust sides of both port engines looks very good. Nothing is visible there in terms of visible bypass. I don't see any light coming through from the front side of the engines to our eyes here at the rear. However, very nice proportion nonetheless. Looks very, very good. And of course all of that is symmetrical on the starboard side of the airplane. Engines on the exhaust side look good. Exhaust cones on the engines are rendered nicely and they are painted silver as you would expect. Looks good. Main gear, in terms of the struts, particularly on the outboard gear, you can see the actuation armature for extending and retracting the main gear. It looks good, and all of that looks straight and level. The airplane doesn't really have any roll dialed in here, and as we saw from the starboard side view, the airplane is sitting straight and level in pitch as well. So, looks good. No issues with the landing gear, no issues with overall shapes and pitches of anything here in terms of the wings or the empennage elements, looks very, very good. Now from the port side of A340-600, take a look at what we've got going on. Well, once again, as we saw on the starboard side, largely symmetrical in terms of the details here evident, but a couple of things that you won't see on the port side that you did see on the starboard side, namely the cargo doors, the loading hatches on the starboard side underneath the passenger deck. You don't see them on the port side, but you do see more or less everything else, starting from the nose where you have got your shut line for the radome. That looks good, and your cockpit windows there, and that Airbus logo that we talked about below the cockpit windows also replicated. Below that, in the chin area, if you will, of the nose, you'll also see some pitot tubes and other air data ports. Looks good. Moving aft, obviously we have got our nose landing gear and our nose gear doors. They look good, and we start to get into our cabin boarding and unboarding doors, your ingress and egress, your L doors here on the left side of the airplane, your L1 and L2 visible, A340-600 title graphics, if you will, that looks good, and then some more static ports below the forward passenger cabin. Looks very, very nice. Additionally, you can see that we have got some topside antennas applied. We have one antenna right in this area, and then we have got a dome SATCOM antenna. I presume that would be in the forward section, and then as we start to move aft, we have got couple more antennas. We've got one that is obscured a little bit here, or perhaps it's just forward, but an antenna right here separately applied, and then a fourth one on the dorsal side of the fuselage. No ventral antennas here modeled, but looks very good nonetheless. Also in the vicinity of the L2 door, we have got our wing root, where a wing comes in to join up with the fuselage. That looks good. Also from this shot, you can see the port engines. Very nice, just as they were on the starboard. They're basically mirrored, as they should be, because they're all identical. But again, Rolls-Royce decals visible there, and other hardware for interfacing with the engines on the ground. Looks good. L3 and L4 doors visible. And as we continue to move aft, we get back to the empennage here from the port side. So L4 and L5 door, there is our registration once again. Foxtrot, Whiskey, Whiskey, Charlie, Charlie, and then our number 376. Very, very cool. Tail cone visible. You can just see this sliver of silver right there. That's the APU exhaust, as we saw from the aft view. Looks good. Also, you can see the shut lines between the fuselage and the horizontal stabilizer, where that joins up. Looks good. Nothing's crooked. There are no untoward gaps or anything like that. So fit and finish on this model, very good from JC Wings. Very, very satisfied with this one. And really, I gotta say, I don't see so much of this model anywhere out there on the internet, particularly not so much on YouTube, but I really like what I'm seeing here. I don't think it's a more popular one, but I'm glad to have it. I think it's a wonderful example of the Airbus family, and really, JC Wings have done a fantastic job with it. No complaints. Taking a look here from nose on, and this is a little bit interesting. Taking a look at things from different perspectives highlights different aspects of the design, whether it be a physical characteristic or something that appears by eye, but not necessarily in other ways. Interesting things start to come out. First of all, engines. We've got 4 of them. They're a very striking and important feature on this airplane, and we can see into the nacelles there, into the intake sides of the engines. De-icing rings, obviously, in the forward portion of the engine. That looks good. And then we start to go inside with our fan blade detail. Very nice detail. It's all what I would call a plate casting, so the blades are not separate elements from the hubs, but they're there. You can tell that you're looking into the intake side of a modern turbofan engine, and it all looks good from that perspective. Moving back toward centerline, though, what do we see? Well, we have got the way that the airplane is sitting here on the gear. It is pretty much truly straight and level. Perhaps ever so slightly there's a little bit of a lean toward screen left, but aircraft right, but really it's not noticeable by eye whatsoever. Something else that is not quite noticeable by eye, but perhaps is amplified here on the camera. Take a look at those cockpit windows. You notice anything untoward about them? And I'm asking because to my eye, I really don't, but on camera, I do. They appear to be ever so slightly not level, a little bit crooked and perhaps even slightly off-center from this perspective. I don't know if I'm seeing something that's parallax in terms of the way that the camera is lined up with the nose of the airplane, or if I'm seeing something that's actually there. But those cockpit windows don't quite look straight and level to me, particularly in contrast to the empennage, in particular the vertical stabilizer, and neither so much, but it's a little harder to see in relation to the attitude of the main wings. I don't know if I'm making that up because, again, looking at this by eye, I don't quite see this, but on camera I see it a whole lot more apparently. Are those cockpit windows a little bit crooked? Maybe they are. Again, it's hard to tell, and the camera is not 100% lined up straight and true with the nose, and it's also magnifying things tremendously. So, are we really seeing something, or is this an artifact of photography? Maybe, either way, I'm not sure. But it's there. It does not at all detract from the display quality of this model, though, I will say. I don't notice that by eye. I legitimately do not notice that by eye. So, either way, whether it's there or not, doesn't really change my opinion of the model. I think this is a very well put together piece, and it is one of the favorite ones. So yeah, I like it, even though perhaps from this particular isolated angle, things might not look exactly as straight and level as they should, but interesting. Going freehand now on A340-600, perhaps we'll get a little bit of a better look at some close-in details that we didn't quite see earlier on. Here on the nose, you can see that we have got that Airbus logo that I've mentioned too many times now, but there it is, plainly visible, looks good. Also very nice in contrast with both the cockpit windows as well as the shut line between the fuselage and the radome. As we get in a little bit closer, you can see the specific arrangement of those cockpit windows. Looks very nice. You can also see that they have got some windscreen wipers printed on there for good measure. It looks good, and again, couldn't quite see that from farther out. Here is that forward section of fuselage. This appears to be symmetrical in terms of the window shades on both sides of the aircraft, so that's interesting. We've got 4 blanked off here on the port side. We had 4 blanked off there on the starboard side, so it looks good. Also, the antennas here on the dorsal side of the fuselage looks good, and some other printed detail from marker lights, as you can see there, the 2 red dots, as well as some hatches there above the forward section of the fuselage. Probably electronics, if I had to bet. Looks good. There's that small dome antenna. It looked a little bit bigger from profile, but no, it's not all that big. There it is, just on center line. And then moving aft, we've got overwing exits that are marked, and also very nice shut lines for our flap actuation armature there, as well as our spoilers, both air and ground spoilers, and also that would be part of what would be called the flaperons, the combination flap and elevon control surface. Looks very good. Engine nacelles here on the starboard wing looks good, and also just in general the leading edge of the starboard wing looks very good. We've got no step detail applied. Very nice. Very, very nice indeed. And of course here on the port wing, engine nacelles, Rolls-Royce detail there. If we focus on them, there we go. Looks good. And then the wingtip, red strobe here on the port wing, green strobe on the starboard wing. Very nice. Continuing down the fuselage, we've got our aftmost separately applied antennas. And then we get into our L4 and L5 doors. And then our registration once again. And our empennage area. Very nice. Everything is very tight on this airplane in terms of all the shut lines between the larger components. Looks good. Very, very nice fit and finish. No complaints here. And from the starboard side, once again, all the details that we could see from the port side pretty much mirrored here on the starboard side. Very cool. A little bit more in terms of external ports here. Some of that could be static ports for ground crews. Some of that could be instrumentation, considering that this airplane is in a house livery and perhaps would have been used for testing purposes, but looks good. And then moving aft, all the other details that we saw in terms of window shades reiterated here. Cool. Leading edge of the starboard wing. Very nice. I like the pylons as well that the engines are mounted to. They look good. Landing gear looks good too, both the mains and the nose. There's your overwing exit, labeled as such. And heading toward the tail cone and the empennage area. Looking very, very nice. Very nice indeed. Yeah, really very impressed with this. Build quality is excellent. Graphics are excellent. I see no printing errors on anything. Really, it's a really cool one, even though perhaps the fuselage length relative to the wing placement, perhaps it looks a little bit disproportionate simply because the Dash 600 has the design that it does, but really it's a very well-presenting airplane aesthetically in my mind as well. And in airline liveries, particularly in the Lufthansa liveries, really do like the way that this airplane looks. So there it was, in 1/400 scale by JC Wings, the Airbus A340-600. Is it the most popular airplane ever? No, it's certainly not. Is it overshadowed by the great giant that preceded it, the 747? Yes, it is. Is it perhaps overshadowed by the great giant that succeeded it, the A380? Yes, it is. Is it even superseded by the airplane that was its immediate successor in the Airbus A350? Yes, it is. However, for all of the superlative generators that surround this airplane in terms of where it fits into the civil aviation market, this airplane stands alone, in my opinion. Number one, it's very unique in that it is a wide-body, single-deck quadjet built for intercontinental travel. Very interesting to see that, in that both of the other jumbo jets built for this market segment are double-deckers, partially in the case of the 747, or totally in the case of the Airbus A380. But here, you've got a single-deck, wide-body, quad-jet airliner doing the same things that the 747 and A380 were designed to do, and doing them very, very well. The A340 series, it's large, it's diverse, and the Dash 200, the smallest of the series, really doesn't look all that much like the Dash 600, the largest of the series. Obviously, they've got the same overall plan, but that fuselage length on the Dash 600 is definitely something interesting, and the proportions of the aircraft are fundamentally different to something like the Dash 200 or the Dash 300. So it's very interesting to see such a wide variety of overall plan and overall dimensions in the same family of aircraft. So that's another bit of unique attributes ascribed to the Dash 600 A340. Other things, though, in terms of what we see here from JC Wings, well, it is a very competently constructed model here in 1/400 scale. Do we really see anything that is different from other manufacturers? No, not so much. But what we do see is a very similar command of the form factor that is 1/400 scale, in that we have very nice fit and finish to everything. The printed graphics are absolutely wonderful. There's no overpainting, there are no misprints, nothing is smudged, everything that should be legible is legible, and everything else that should be recognizable as an element of the fuselage or an element of the livery is recognizable as such, with no variations from the expected norm present here. So, in terms of quality of assembly and finishing, absolutely wonderful example here from JC Wings, and really, if you do like these civil jet models, I think you'd be well served to get this one. This one in particular, I'm not entirely sure when it was released. I would have to assume at earliest mid-2000s, but most likely sometime in the 2010s this one would have come out, although JC Wings don't put any years on their boxes, so it's harder to tell. However, be that as it may, definitely if you like this segment of the model aviation market, yeah, this is definitely one to get. I don't know if that is a printing fault in terms of the cockpit windows being a little bit askew, or if that's just some strange parallax effect in how I'm doing this photography. Whatever the case, it's not evident by eye, and well, it doesn't change my opinion of the model. This is a very nice one as well. And for this one being as nice as it is as a model, definitely I think it is a fair tribute and testament to the real-world A340, because in addition to it being one of the other jumbo jets, in terms of being the longest of the A340 family, and perhaps not the most popular civil jet ever, but definitely one of the most unique, probably the best attribute of the A340 series on the whole is that amid years in service amid millions of miles flown, amid millions of people flown aboard them, not a single loss of life can be attributed to any sort of accident involving the A340 in carrying out its service as a civil jet. Peerless safety record for an airplane that's been flying for as long as the A340 series has, not matched by any other airliner in service today. Definitely very, very cool. Until next time, though, I do thank you all very, very much for watching Ferrari Bound 601, saying thank you, and of course, we will see you soon.